Dopamine swipe, dopamine swipe. Followers, likes, double tap. Now they control your life.
What is going on, beautiful people? Welcome back to the 817 podcast. I know you missed us. You have your favorite co-host team and Zeta and EJ Carrion in the building, ready to rumble as it's been a while. Shout out to everyone who joined us on IG Live. And how'd you feel about that?
I thought it went better than expected. I was a little nervous being live and all, but I thought it went very smoothly. I thought we had consistent audience participation. I didn't sit there with, crickets and only one or two people.
Yeah. And I thought it was solid for, the people who joined us, and you can see that still on Instagram. We are back live in the pod studio. However, what we're going to do this episode is since we've been out for 2 weeks, there's just a lot of stories to hit. So we're going to kind of go off of our traditional path where we do 3 short stories, 1 big story, wins and losses. And we're just going to go through what looks like 8 different stories and just really give you a synopsis of those 8 stories that we think are important. Again, this pod is for those who care about the city of Fort Worth. We talk about politics, business development, culture, and the growth of our amazing city. And so that's what we do. There's going to be some state stuff in this as well, as we have new state laws that have been started since September 1st. We're going to kind of go through those, looking at a Texas Tribune article. So let's dive into one of our most common short story topics that we continue to bring up, and that's Tarrant County commissioners and how we are operating our budget. So Tarrant County commissioners voted last Tuesday to cut tens of millions of dollars from affordable housing, child care, and public health funding. They reallocated much of that money to build a new law enforcement training center and to continue a contract with a private prison 270 miles away in Garza County. The county received about $408 million from the federal government through the American Rescue Plan Act in 2021. The act gave us money, if you remember, to combat COVID-19 and use that to recover from the pandemic. Now our county commissioners have voted 3-2, Republicans for, Democrats against, to take money from the house that was budgeted for housing and public health, and now is using that to fund and invest in this center. If you remember, we've talked about this center and how they were trying to find funds for it for a while, and lo and behold, they got creative, and now they're using ARPA funds because there was $15 million left over with housing, according to Commissioner Roy Brooks.
I think there was one comment about here. It says, remember in the early days, whoever those funds were allocating those funds, nobody really was oriented to what the next couple of years were going to look like. And so the landscape has changed and the economy has changed. And so therefore they think that they need to take a look at changing. But I don't think the landscape or the economy has shifted away from the need of affordable housing and permanent supportive housing. So I'm not quite sure if that really, I'm all for going back and looking at things when time has passed by, but I'm not really sure what has changed to make the need for childcare, supportive housing, public health, and affordable housing no longer a top priority, because those all seem like top priorities to me.
Yeah, I mean, and according to County Judge O'Hare, he pointed to, he said, quote, "We didn't not fund childcare and we didn't not fund housing. We just didn't allocate every single penny that was requested." It looks like we only handled 2/3 of the housing budget, and a lot of the comments around here is also around that we didn't have enough projects requesting for funding, but yet there are some places like Justin Place, which will receive $1.5 million in fiscal recovery funds, about $2.5 million less than they initially requested. The 2 other projects is Renaissance Heights and Casa Mia will receive $3.5 million and $500,000 in federal emerging rental assistance funds from the county. The city is contributing $1.5 million in funds to the Renaissance Heights project and to Justin's Place. I don't know. I guess this is just to me, I guess, unfortunate that we don't think like I look at the people who have young kids And I think the child care piece is always a big crisis of having more kids or having kids at all. And I just think like this is like for us to think that we can't be more creative in finding ways to, support people raising families and starting families. If you're going to equate you can't finding police officers, well, you're not going to find future Americans if you're not going to provide childcare. So I just think the fact that you can't find funds and strategies to really continue to double down on childcare is a loss. And like you said, with housing, right? Inflation.
The systemic problem of being able to find affordable housing is not going to have more people coming here to be able to work and do those jobs. And I attended a meeting that they had on the child care piece. And they had some really good plans for funding early childhood development, which, getting in at the very beginning would save a lot of money in the long run when you're trying to educate kids that didn't have that head start of early childhood, quality childcare at an early age.
Yeah, and this is just another example of us being police crazy, and I just think it's just unfortunate that this is where strategic federal dollars was going to prepare for improving the quality of living.
And I think I did see some discussion about like what would be included in this training facility, and that they were relooking at it because there was something about it not including a gun range and a track. And I just drove by the Bob Bullen the other day and looked at that track, and I know there's a gun range in there, and I've not seen anybody circle back to talk about the fact that there are those types of facilities already existing in Fort Worth. And could we not be collaborating and using each other's facilities versus replicating things that already exist?
Yeah. So all in all, again, it's just this is showing you the importance of voting at the end of the day. And when you when a party wins that's aligned with the police association and the county is the way it is, we are going to continue to feed the police agenda. So we're going to now move into another group that shows you an example of how you vote is what you get. And so now we're moving into state politics.
Yeah, I know. You said we were stepping away from our normal format of, one big story, 3 short stories, and wins and losses. But I think that we might be touching on some wins and losses, maybe even in the same article as we go through these.
Yeah, and it feels like a lot of loss this week. This is a pretty, looking at the tabs, there's a lot of loss here. But let's go ahead and dive into so the state worked obviously with more than 770 new laws passed by Texas legislators this year.
But I think there were over like 6,000 bills filed during the
wild.
Session. So when you look at like how many actually go through when there's that many filed, it is quite an interesting process.
Yeah, that just sounds crazy. And so September 1st is the traditional start date for laws passed during a regular legislative session, though some can have their effective dates delayed in order to be fully implemented. Let's go ahead and just kind of dive into ones that Texas Tribune highlighted as the most important. We can first talk about the General Appropriations Act. House Bill 1 directs the spending of state and federal tax dollars for the next 2 years, including $144 billion in state general revenue taxes. It spends more than half of a historic $32.7 billion surplus. That means money that the state has extra that was available to lawmakers this cycle, and it leaves more than $12 billion unspent in Texas coffers. It fills the state's emergency and highway funds and makes payments towards stabilizing the state's retirement investment funds, and includes pay raises for employees of state agencies, for retired teachers. Voters will be asked to approve several measures, including $12 billion in property tax cuts and $1.5 billion effort to expand broadband internet access.
So the article I'm looking at is actually a Star Telegram article. I think you said you're looking at a Texas Tribune article, but the one I have up is 774 Texas laws go into effect on September 1st, including ones about diapers, alcohol, electric cars. So I think one of the comments I made when scanning these things was that they spent a whole lot of time talking about cultural issues and maybe not so much time talking about some other things that people might be concerned about. But school safety legislation was one. House Bill 3 is a wide-ranging school safety bill that requires districts to have at least one armed officer at each school during the day. Some school districts in North Texas are struggling to meet that requirement. I drove past a high school this morning that had 2 Fort Worth ISD security cars out front and a Fort Worth police officer, so I'm hoping that nothing negative was going on in that instance. But I think they're trying to sort out how they're going to meet this requirement, because I think a lot of these laws often are passed with not necessarily the necessary funding attached to them. So then those who are required to carry them out are left to try to figure out the budgeting within their already confined budgets to do that. There's a fentanyl penalty under House Bill 6. A person could face a murder charge if they give fentanyl to anyone who dies as a result of the drug. The criminal penalty comes as lawmakers try to curb fentanyl deaths. The drug is sometimes taken unknowingly when a person believes it's a different type of pill. And I think we had a second article that's from the Fort Worth Report that drilled down into House Bill 3 a little bit more. Oh, that was House Bill 3 is the one about guards on campuses. And that was the one that went into the details of how that's going to be a struggle. But there was a Fort Worth Star-Telegram article indicating that fentanyl has killed 672 people in the Fort Worth area, with threats of murder charges help stop dealers.
Other House bills that I see also listed that I think are important is the power grid. House Bill 1500 changes aspects of how electricity can be bought and sold on the state's main power grid, with an aim toward getting more on-demand power, such as natural gas-fueled power plants built. Changes include creating a financial tool known as ancillary service that will pay power generators that can produce power within 2 hours and run for at least 4 hours to help smooth out supply during high demand times. Requiring new power producers that connect to the grid starting in 2027 to be prepared to produce a set amount of power during times of high speed demand. And requiring companies to pick up the tab for building new transmission lines that connect power generations to the grid if costs go above a certain amount. Another one that I feel like was needed to be highlighted was we already kind of know about the bill talking about books. So like
right,
that was
House
a big
Bill
one.
900.
We talked about that last week as well.
Right.
What are some ones that you see here that you want to make sure that we can be aware of?
I mean, I thought a positive one, I think, is the Crown Act, which basically establishes protection against race-related hair discrimination in housing, education, and at work. Although I did see a few articles recently about people being told they had to cut their hair, or, there's still institutions that are addressing how people wear their hair. So it's crazy to me that you have to make laws about that, but apparently we do.
Yep. Of course, there was also a lot of again, I think what you kind of talked about, like what's unfortunate about our state politicians, they're trying to write the culture of Texas and tell us how we can live within that culture. So we had a lot of stuff around
drag
trans
show
rights,
restrictions,
drag show, college sports, and then also transition-related care for children.
There was one that jumped out at me, and I thought the variable speed limits, House Bill 1885, which allows for temporary adjustments to speed limits based on road conditions like bad weather. I think this one may have been a bill introduced by Ramon Romero, who is one of our local representatives, coming out of the deadly pileup that we had on an icy stretch of I-35. I had hoped that there would also be under a speed limit heading something addressing the speed limits in residential neighborhoods, which is something that I personally have gone down to Austin to advocate for the last 5 legislative sessions. So that means 10 years. People have been working on that. And that one still has not passed, which is really unfortunate. Oh, there was one other electric vehicle fee. Senate Bill 505 requires electric vehicle owners to pay $400 fee when they register a new car and $200 each time the vehicle registration is renewed, and that money will go to the state highway fund, which is largely used for public road projects. We basically know that the gas tax that everybody pays into that drives gas fueled cars is not covering maintenance or the additional roads that people are building. So I think there was some thought that people driving electric vehicles were skirting their duty to pay for the roads which they drive on. And so this is an attempt to make them pay similarly to people who pay gas taxes. Again, I think this is just kind of nipping away at the edges versus addressing the overall bigger issue that could be solved by not having everyone drive in their own individual vehicles and have more mass transit opportunities.
It's crazy that you meet every 2 years, you get 6,000 proposals, and you think these were the most interesting ones to
the most important to move forward.
Yeah. And so another big one that I thought was the limiting the power of big cities. House Bill 2127 prevents cities and counties from enacting local laws that go further than what's allowed under broad areas of the state law. The Republican-backed law is the culmination of a years-long effort to rein in progressive policies in the state's bluer urban areas. Supporters say the law is needed to provide businesses with relief from growing patchwork of local regulations. Critics says it kneecaps local officials' ability to govern and does away with much-needed local ordinance like mandatory water breaks for construction workers. Cities have already sued to block it and have been calling this the Death Star bill.
And I think there was some pause on the implementation of that recently in one of those court.
Yeah. So those are kind of what I see here. We see some speeding up housing development. House Bill 14 allows third-party review of building applicants if cities and counties fail to issue building permits within 15 days. The law is intended to speed up the local development process to build homes and apartments more quickly. Studies show that longer regulatory process for housing permits drive up home prices and rents. I saw
I think here in Fort Worth, though, they've done something more recently, this one-stop shop for development, which was basically to kind of streamline that development process. So I think that was underway prior to any state law going into effect.
Yeah, and I think I know a lot of the people in the real estate community and the development community were yippee-ki-yay, all about that. So creating a new business court. House Bill 9 will create a new judicial district with jurisdictions to hear cases involving businesses across the state, as long as the value for actions being disputed exceeds $10 million. The judges for the district will be appointed by the governor and serve 2-year terms. Supporters of the bill said it will help reduce court backlogs, ensure that judges hearing business cases have expertise on complex civil business litigation, and help Texas maintain its economic strength.
I will tell you that someone I know who is a lawyer is not a fan of this.
Yeah.
So, but I'm not an expert in that, and I don't remember all the ins and outs and details as to why there was concerns here, but I think one of the concerns was the appointment by the governor of those judges. They're not elected, so who are they going to be accountable to?
Yeah. And it's just crazy to see that, how much, the bluer metro areas are actually the economic development areas, yet these state officials from nowhere, Texas, is wanting to tell them and dictate and create business centers to create state and claim that it's the state of Texas that's thriving when really it's your local blue cities that have made you continue to thrive and create four of
there
the
was
top
literally
13 cities.
Sorry to interrupt. There was literally one bill, and I cannot remember which one it was, but it was introduced by someone who comes from a very rural area with a population way lower than what the bill ended up saying it would affect. So it was a bill for cities over 1 million people, or 900,000, I think it was. And so it literally was a bill introduced by someone whose own city is not going to be affected by it at all.
Yeah.
And it's going to affect all these other large cities.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. And I think that's a common thing that we're seeing across the state bills. So let's go ahead and continue to move through here.
So there are 2 articles that dove deeper into several of the bills. The House Bill 3 mandating the armed guards on Texas campuses, and a Star Telegram article talking about fentanyl that we will attach in the show notes for people to be able to access to dig deeper into those. I think that one of them was suggesting, our local sheriff is suggesting, that the ability to go after dealers on murder charges is going to alleviate these fentanyl deaths. And I'm not sure what that's based on. We have a lot of laws about things that don't necessarily stop people from doing things. And I'm not sure how you catch people doing those things. But he says he wants these laws to send a message to anyone who conducts that kind of business in Texas. Yeah. And he literally says that there are, like, if somebody is a drug dealer in college, that this should, like, for example, he mentioned an 18-year-old in Tarrant County who currently faces 40 years in prison for selling fentanyl.
Yeah. Now, I can see the idea of now this possibly being murder, if you sell fentanyl, can scare young people maybe of participating and be ever exploring dealing drugs. If that's his hypothesis, I can see a through line to that. But I don't know statistically if that's true or not.
Well, they say experts also are worried that more people will not call 911 if somebody is overdosing because they're afraid of prosecution. Mm-hmm. So I think that is a concern.
Interesting. Yep. That's a good point too.
I mean, it's tragic, the number of people who are dying from this drug. And I think that there definitely needs to be, things done to alleviate that. So I'm not saying that we shouldn't have laws in place to try to curb that.
Yeah. I'm going to go ahead. Yeah. Just to hit the school district one with the police one. The Fort Worth report did reach out to all 12 Fort Worth public school districts to ask how they will meet the mandate of the new law. With armed security guards at each campus, Fort Worth will not meet the deadline. And they say, funding's a big piece for that. They're talking about tens of millions of dollars they will need in order to actually hit that goal with so many schools that they have, and with their larger schools needing more than one police officer. The only one that replied that they will meet it is Northwest ISD. White Settlement ISD spokesperson said the district still has to hire 5 additional officers. Eagle Mountain, Saginaw, and Lake Worth will require an extension to meet the mandates. HEB ISD trustees suspended asking for the extension until the superintendent meets with district staff. So several ISDs in our area are having difficulties with this hire. To me, the other part too is just like the amount of responsibility and pressure this puts on someone who's going to represent in a school is just crazy, that you're going to just hire some bodies and figure out someone who can just do it. I mean, like, it's crazy to be like, if your name is a chief resource officer, that the only qualification and training to be the only and the leader of a campus on resources just sounds crazy, that this is how we are going at implementing these important roles.
Yeah, we wait until they hash these things out at the state level, and then the laws come down, and boom, September 1st, everybody's supposed to have a plan to do them, and there's a whole lot of unfunded mandates, I think.
All righty, so let's go ahead into the next story. The next story is an update on TAD. Last time we talked about the technical executive resigning. Now the TAD chief appraiser resigns after mounting pressures following this series of scandals. Jeff Law wrote to the board of directors that his last day will be Wednesday, September 6th, which was last week. In recent months, I've been approached from both private and public sector organizations regarding different employment possibilities. He quoted, while I appreciate the vote of confidence I received from the board and its last board meeting, I've decided to pursue one of those opportunities. So the TAD board voted for confidence, and
Tarrant County commissioners voted no confidence.
No confidence. Tarrant County Judge Tim O'Hare said it's about time, end quote. And people and business owners in Tarrant County can finally start to see the process to restore public trust and TAD again. So that's just an update here. Remember as well, if you didn't hear the last episode on the IG Live, TAD's former head of IT, Cal Wood, was captured on audio urging staffers to lie about the website issues, which is why he was also ousted first. So it seems like we're having, yeah. I like that little metaphor there, or pun. I don't know. There you go. All right. So now we're going to move into what I think is, some of the just infrastructure development big pieces. We're going to talk about housing. We're going to talk about Panther Island. We're going to talk about Clear Fork. And so we're on the back 3 stories of this episode. And I knew you had an event.
We did. So I'll start with the Fort Worth Report article. How will Panther Island impact Fort Worth's north side? North neighbors have their say. So Community Design Fort Worth, which is the nonprofit that I work for, held a panel that we decided to hold after the Fort Worth Report had a community conversation on Panther Island, at which the perspective of Northside was mentioned, and one of the panel members of the Fort Worth Report panel was Professor Dennis Chassa, who is from UTA. And so coming out of that meeting, that panel discussion, there was quite a lot of interest in the perspective that Dennis brought to the table from Northside's perspective. And so Dennis put together a panel that included a lot of stakeholders from Northside that we had in the Rose Marine Theater, or Arts de la Rosa Theater. In addition to the panel discussion that we had on the 30th, there was an exhibit that is still at Arts de la Rosa, and you can go check it out, of models of historically Hispanic Northside neighborhoods and projects that were produced by students of UTA in their architecture class. And one of those students was also on the panel. So basically, after that June panel, we wanted to draw more attention to the lived experience of people who live and work and play in the North Side, especially as the city and other project partners create a new roadmap for economic development around Panther Island. So the article touches on, where we are with Panther Island, the amount of funding that was federal funding that came last year, and the fact that this group of students that Professor Chassa had take a look at Panther Island kind of looked at the plan that was done 20 years ago and said, there's a lot of public space proposed here, but a lot of that public space is like a boat dock marina situation. And one of the students indicated, that he didn't own a boat, and none of the people he knows owns a boat. And so maybe we need to take a look at what this public space is all about, because public space is really important, and places for people to gather where they're not required to make any kind of financial investment. Don't have to buy something, don't have to own a home. Just public spaces for people are very important. And so they came up with some ideas of what that might look like. So we had this panel discussion. I thought it was pretty successful. There were representatives from HR&A, which is the consulting firm that the city has hired to take a look at Panther Island and what that land use plan might look like going forward. There were also representatives from Tarrant County Water District and the city of Fort Worth in the audience, as residents and business owners and other stakeholders that support, and neighborhood association vice president, the president of the Hispanic Chamber, all kind of expressed their desires for what Panther Island will look like and what its connectivity to the vibrant family-centered culture of Northside would be. I think Annette Landeros, who's the president and CEO of the Fort Worth Chamber, brought up that she's from San Antonio originally, and the San Antonio Riverwalk is definitely like a tourist place that people who live in San Antonio don't necessarily go to the Riverwalk. And so the hope would be that Panther Island would be a large attraction for people, tourist-wise, but also for the local folks. And so small businesses here are equally invested in seeing that Panther Island meets the needs of their own community. And community members are also concerned about being priced out of Northside as new residents move in and property taxes rise. So some residents that live there and have lived there for generations expressed the need for there to be some intentionality around all of these plans. But there was a second article which touches on public meetings that are going to be coming up. So there'll be a public meeting on Fort Worth Panther Island project starting this week, which at the time that this pod drops, the first meeting will have happened the prior week on Thursday. But the Fort Worth Report article does have a listing of all of the public meetings that are coming up. There's the first one being September 7th, There'll be one September 14th, September 19th, September 26th, the 28th, and the 30th. And all of those meetings, some of those meetings will be conducted in both English and Spanish. And that is definitely to get input from everyone who has an opinion about this topic.
Oh, yeah. People, we're talking $1.16 billion for this project to transform 800 acres. So input, keeping the cultural fabric of Northside, not turning into the Riverwalk of San Antonio, making sure no Margaritavilles show up, all these things that you might be worried about. If you're worried about something and you want to hear what would be best for your constituents and your community, I highly recommend going to one of these public meetings scheduled.
Yep, they've listed off some of the cultural assets that exist in the community that they hope will not be, priced out. That some of these places might even have an opportunity to expand and exist on Panther Island. So not just making sure that they are able to continue to be in the area of Northside, but also, local businesses having an opportunity to participate in the development and growth that occurs in Panther Island itself.
Yeah. Well, I think this next article can transition into maybe, there can be some middle housing on Panther Island. You see what I did there? The next article we're going to talk about is, I just learned about this term while reading this article, but Sandra Sadek, September 5th, article in the Fort Worth Report says, Mind the Gap. Could proposed new zoning help Fort Worth find the missing middle housing? And can you tell us what middle housing is and how this could be beneficial to the city?
Yeah, so Community Design Fort Worth actually did a missing middle housing summit a few years ago with Near Southside and some other, and the city of Fort Worth. But middle housing is mid-sized, often moderately priced dwelling types that are often referred to as missing because very few of them have been built in the United States since the early 40s. The term, as used in Fort Worth, describes a set of residential building types between detached single-family housing and large apartment buildings. So that's like duplex, triplex, quadruplex, up to a small apartment building. So anything not single-family detached or large apartment. And there's a shortage of that missing middle housing, a lot of times due to zoning constraints and a shift to a car-centric pattern of development that challenges developers faced with financing to do those multi-unit dwellings. But some of those notable benefits of promoting missing middle housing is affordability, walkability, and increased living options for residents. So what the city of Fort Worth is planning to do is take a look at a zoning category that would encompass all of these housing types so that it's taking away the barriers for producing this type of housing. But the proposal also wants to create a new regulation allowing secondary dwelling units to be rented out in single-family zoning near bus routes. So that's another way of providing more housing in an area that already has all the infrastructure, all the streets, all the water, all the sewer. So they do note in this article that the zoning ordinance has not had a full overhaul in some time. Staff regularly works on it with community stakeholders and council members to do minor updates and text amendments. But as a result, they've identified at least 15 text amendments that they want to take a look at. And they are budgeting this year and hope to budget over the next 2 to 3 years to address all of these text amendments. I think the only thing that I would add is that, I read a book a while back, and only nerdy planners like me would read this book, but maybe some of you are out there. There's a book called Zoned in the USA, The Origins and Implications of American Land Use Regulation. And Fort Worth is actually mentioned in this book about 6 times. But one of the things it's mentioned for is that we have a zoning map that shows all of the zoning categories on it, which some European cities don't do it that way. But we had, at the time of the writing of that book, 37 land use zoning districts. And that's not counting all the planned developments that we have, which are in the hundreds. And so I think that one thing that the city could take a look at before it continues down this road of kind of tweaking at the edges and possibly adding additional zoning categories is something that is going on across the nation, and that is re-evaluating zoning overall. And I'm not saying get rid of zoning. Everybody points to Houston and freaks out and says, we need zoning. I'm saying if you have 37 land use categories in your zoning, that's a lot. Yeah. And maybe there's an ability to do an overall analysis of the entire document. And instead of adding things to address the things that you want to improve, are there things that we can combine, consolidate, and pare down to make it simpler? Yeah. So that would be the thing that I would say might be helpful. I think that it's good that they're budgeting for this. It's something that will make a difference, but it would be great if they haven't done this, and maybe they have, but do an overall diagnostic so that we can see exactly what changes are needed to support these text amendments. So it would be really great if there was definitely an overall diagnostic up front.
I love it. Yeah, and it looks like it's not too much money being asked to do this, right? $100,000 a year over the next 2 to 3 years to address these needs.
Yeah, I think that probably an overall, the thing I'm asking for them to do would be a little bit more expensive than that. So maybe that's why we're doing the incremental piece by piece, but I definitely think that it would be beneficial.
Alrighty, well, let's go ahead and move into the next story. This story to me is an important story because last week we spent all of our time talking about successful incentive packages for companies in economic development. However, Sandra Sadek is on fire, and she has another article called Experts Question $22 million Tax Break to Move Luxury Car Dealership to Clear Fork Shopping Center. This is a really powerful article, I think, on how the Fort Worth is moving and communicating with businesses locally. This is different than what we've had in the past. This is about Autobahn coming to Clear Fork, which was already in the city. Other developments that we talked about last week were people moving in and coming to the city or expanding offices. Yeah. So, and I know your background here will probably have a better kind of take on what you see here. So I'll let you kind of lead us in.
All right. So the original incentive package was brought to the council in May, and I remember seeing this, and my first initial thought was, we're providing an incentive to move an existing business from one part of the city to another part of the city. And I wasn't quite sure, other than the fact that I saw the opportunity for redevelopment along White Settlement, where the Autobahn businesses are currently located, as a positive thing that could happen. I don't necessarily think that, those car dealerships along that roadway adjacent to Panther Island, adjacent to downtown, is the highest and best use for that area. And it's a transit served area, and therefore you could have mixed use there. You could have people live, work, and play there, and that might be a better use. So having those dealerships move to another location could incentivize development, or could boost development in the area that is currently dominated by those luxury car dealerships. So that was my first thought. Just that I wasn't sure, what the need for incentivizing, because what are we getting out of it? So this article does dive into the fact that several economic development professionals are a little bit concerned and questioning the logic behind an incentive that provides upfront support, where additional economic spillover would impact the community. That's normally what you're looking for. Like, there's going to be some benefit, like it's going to provide affordable housing, or it's going to provide jobs above and beyond what we currently have. And from reading this, it doesn't appear that there are any requirements that any of the housing that's going to be a part of this be affordable, and that there's no numbers of jobs or salaries attached to this incentive. There is some comment to the fact that this would deliver this development sooner than it would be delivered if there weren't incentives. And I know, like I said on the last Instagram, where we focused a lot on economic development, that every economic development package that I saw when I was serving on council would show numbers to the positive for the city. So while you may be abating taxes up front, the overall taxes brought in by the development in the long run would be more than what was being abated. And so there would be a positive in the column to the city's side. I haven't seen this fully, the whole thing. Yeah. So I don't know. I would assume that that would be the case. But
well, usually what's cool about these incentive packages, when they bring them up, they talk literally directly what's the outcomes and goals of these packages. This one came with nothing besides
I didn't go back to the May meeting.
Garage.
I didn't go back to the May meeting to read the details.
But I remember the first article about this. It wasn't like the one about Zheng Chuang, and the other one's like,
with the jobs,
$82,000 jobs, right, and all that. Like we never.
And I think
really
one
got
of the
that.
quotes from folks representing the developer said that the details will be coming later. So I think there's
a free parking garage. Which you can park at Clear Fork.
You know
for free.
me and what I think about parking. This includes 1,700 parking spaces.
Wow, going around in that little circle of the Clear Fork, man, good luck.
Well, you just go straight into a parking garage and you don't have a problem trying to find a street, right? Yeah. I mean, an on-street parking spot. But I don't know exactly what the details are of what the return to the city is going to be. I just think it's a lost opportunity. We say we have policies to do mixed income housing and to not have concentrations of poverty. And so clearly the housing in this area is all market rate and above luxury type of housing. Yeah. So if we're going to incentivize, I think we should always figure out a way to include an affordable component for housing. And I think we should always include incentivizing jobs for an expansion of job availability. And I won't even mention the fact that I don't think that there's any public transportation that touches the Clear Fork development at all. I mean, there's buses on Bryan Irvin and there's buses on Hewlin, but that's quite a long walk to get to Clear Fork from those two streets.
Yeah, and I like this what this person said here. They said having a car dealership as the anchor tenant of a planned development like Clear Fork seems like not an attractive place to live. Who would want to live by an auto dealership? Like that.
I mean, Tesla has done auto dealerships that are kind of different. They don't have all those cars inventory right there. They just have these fancy showrooms. But I think if you're storing cars the way they store cars in their current locations, that's not necessarily something that I would want to live next to.
Yeah. It just doesn't seem that attractive. And so I'm going to just kind of talk about, to me, like this just looks like all the legacy people of Fort Worth getting in a circle, talking about their businesses, talking about their developments. Obviously, Casco Land and the Edwards family. You also have, just look at who's really involved with this. You got Paxton Motherall, who's a Tarrant Regional Water District Board member who was just elected. He's the vice president of Casco. Other directors include members of the Edwards family. Also, people on that board includes the Jaron family, who is also part of development.
Those are all people who are on the Casco board, though, not the Water District board, correct. So we're being clear. Yes.
But this is like what it shows is, Autobahn as Bass could be a private owner of the Autobahn vehicles. All this just seems like the legacy elites coming together, hanging out with the political people, and somehow getting some type of incentive that really makes their lives easier to accelerate their business plan without really too much clarity on what it's going to actually benefit the city.
Yeah, I mean, the folks that are economic development experts in the article that are quoted say the developer and the dealerships will sell luxury cars to wealthy people for which it will get public money that will not go into programs that eliminate inequalities such as childcare, support, public health programs, and others. Most economic development agreements offer job creation clauses that create a number of quality jobs, as well as clawbacks if the company doesn't meet those requirements. I mean, these are all things that we touched on in last week's pod or Instagram Live. Other common local benefits include affordable housing, and these are all policies that the city says are high priorities for them. And so unless there's something that we're not seeing, which is possible, I just think that this was a missed opportunity to make sure that some of these things were required and not just hope that there'll be some kind of trickle-down effect that delivers these things.
Yeah, and let's just be clear, this was unanimously approved by city council. So, yeah, I just think this was a great article. If this article wasn't written, and I mean, also kudos, it was very written with not bias. I think if Fort Worth Weekly would have wrote this article, you'd really hear all the underbellies of legacy power and the operations of how, you want something done and you're rich in Fort Worth, you can make it happen.
Everyone knows that I cannot not talk about a topic of traffic challenges. So there was an article in the Fort Worth Report, regional officers consider traffic challenges for the 2026 World Cup, and here is what we know so far. With visitors arriving in North Texas for the FIFA World Cup in 2026, they will find themselves headed to AT&T Stadium in a variety of ways. Classic transportation options such as shuttles, bikes, scooters, as well as more novel methods like helipads and other emerging technology. For local officials planning the event, nothing is off the table, which I hope that would mean robust multimodal transportation, which Arlington has not seen fit to really be a part of at this moment. But the North Texas Council of Governments, which is the regional planning organization, has been meeting with partners across the region for the last 6 months to identify and address road and transportation needs, of which there will be many. Because if all of the people coming to these World Cup events are trying to get there in their own single occupancy vehicle, it is going to be massive gridlock. And, small rideshare services without any regional transit stops near the stadium is going to be a problem. I think this just takes us back to that whole conversation we had when Amazon was looking for a second headquarters. And in their RFP, they basically said multimodal transit, and we didn't have it, so we didn't make a short list. And we now are having this event coming, so it's no longer the making of the short list, it's coming. And it would be really great if it could spur some other modes of transit. I will say that I recently went to a public meeting that North Central Texas Council of Governments held at Central Station downtown Fort Worth, and there are additional opportunities to see this presentation that is talking about high-speed rail between Dallas and Fort Worth, and the fact that they've already gone through phase 1 where they identified a whole bunch of different routes, and one of the final route that they have settled on is the I-30 route, which shows a station in Arlington. Now, I personally think that Arlington needs to be a more robust partner in a public transportation agency like Trinity Metro in order to avail themselves of public transit. So whether there's a stop in Arlington or not along that high-speed rail, I think there should be, but I think all the partners need to be financially invested in that in order to benefit from it.
Yeah, no, that is interesting to take, and we're going to in 2026, if we're still doing the pod, that is. We're clearly going to have the article, and it's going to be World Cup Haven, and we're going to be sitting here having the argument of how crazy traffic was.
And I'm going to have to figure out how to get there because my husband's a huge soccer fan, so we'll definitely be going to some of these games.
So, we're going to have all the conversation about how we did not plan for this chaos. Maybe I can be your Uber driver. If you leave 5 stars.
There you go. So another article I would just touch on is that there's a tequila company that has big dreams for historic Fort Worth flea market property. And that article is a Fort Worth Report article. I think it is similar to some of the stuff we talked about with Northside and Panther Island, because this group has clearly intentionally made some of the cultural things that exist in this area a part of their plan going forward to keep the flea market. And so these are kind of some of the cultural assets that it's important to document and keep a list of, and then incorporate into things as redevelopment occurs. And so since this is kind of north side adjacent, and is keeping, and the flea market at Henderson came up during the conversation of Northside's perspective of Panther Island. I think that there's possibility for keeping some of those things, even with improvements that are bringing new business.
Yeah. I think another part there would be the other story that now we're adding to is the 14 flood reduction project in Tarrant County will be eligible for millions of dollars in state infrastructure funds after Trinity River officials finalized their regional plan in June. The Trinity Regional Flood Planning Group, formed in 2020, was a part of an effort to create Texas' first statewide flood plan in the wake of Hurricane Harvey's devastating impact of the Gulf Coast. The group's target region encompasses the entire length of the Trinity River Basin from Dallas to Fort Worth down to Liberty County in Houston. So the flood plan is set to be adopted in September 2024, and it's crucial for cities like Fort Worth and Arlington that lack the dollars to fund massive investments in stormwater infrastructure. And let's be clear, we don't lack the investment, we just give it all to cops. But anyways, to be eligible for grant funding from the state's flood infrastructure fund, a flood mitigation project must be recommended by the regional planning group. And last November, the Trinity Group adopted an initial plan that recommended 7 projects for future opportunities. All were located in North Texas, and so with 4 in Dallas County and 3 in Tarrant County.
Yeah, and generally, the City of Fort Worth Water Department Flood Management Team has a map on the city's website that has been keeping track of flood-prone and flood areas that have flooded. So these are things outside of the 100-year flood, so that may not show up on a 100-year map, but it's necessary to know these things. And that has been information that the city has been trying to make available to the general public. There's been some hesitancy on the part of some other constituency groups, but that is available on the city's website. So if you're looking to purchase property, you can go and check and see if there's a history of flooding that has happened there. So I think that department has gotten out ahead and hopefully will have the areas that might be eligible for these fixes to be on that list.
I love it. Do you feel like we're missing anything else? I think we're good too. Well, we provided a lot to you guys this week, and we're excited to be back in action together. We're going to be doing one next week as well, and just kind of keep you updated with where we are. A lot is in the docket, and I'm sure I'm going to get some text messages after this one from all of you who are unhappy or happy about what we talked about today.
Great getting back together after a little bit of a break, but boy, it's hard to catch up with the news when you go 2 full weeks.
Oh yeah, big time. So take care and have a wonderful rest of your week.
Peace out.
Now they control your life, control your life. Dopamine's right.